BlackRock is taking over the world and no one is stopping them.
This is not another mainstream video about BlackRock. By now, people know the public narrative.
BlackRock is an extremely dangerous company.
They have that much control to get everybody to do what they want them to do. Larry Fink, the guy running BlackRock, is really the president of the United States. If we look at the kind of influence he's got in every industry, Joe.
But Larry Fink isn't content with owning companies anymore. Slowly but surely, he is taking control of the very bloodlines of the global system. Larry Fink has started executing his $68 trillion game plan, and no one is going to stop him.
The fact that BlackRock has extraordinary influence behind the scenes, it's unprecedented. This is not good for the public interest.
This is Tariq Fancy, an ex-BlackRock executive turned whistleblower. We've sat down with him to bring you some exclusive insights into the secretive world of BlackRock.
I was formerly BlackRock's first chief investment officer for sustainable investing.
And to uncover BlackRock's new game plan, we've interviewed Dr. Thomas Mulroy, an expert in public banking and infrastructure finance.
The United States, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. My administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal, and we've already started doing it.
BlackRock strikes deal to bring ports on both sides of Panama Canal under American control.
Trump wants to reclaim the Panama Canal. And while the world is focused on the headlines, most people have no idea what's really going on behind the curtain. This isn't just about Trump's America First playbook or about BlackRock securing the most important trade route in the Western Hemisphere. The Panama Canal is only a tiny piece in a far bigger board game.
The one international airport at your major city in a region, right? You buy that and you have control of it, and it's a monopoly.
This is about a global game of airports, pipelines, power grids and data routes. And right now, Larry Fink is quietly buying up the whole board. We'll get to all of that, but to understand why Larry Fink is reshaping the world, we have to start at the moment he realized he wanted to control it. It's the late 1960s. The average Californian teenager dreams about changing the world, or at least escaping it for a little while. But Larry Fink isn't your average teenager. While others chase enlightenment, Larry doesn't concern himself with such trivial matters. He's consumed by a far more important question. How can he become one of the most powerful men in the world? How can he, a shoemaker's son from nowhere, be spoken of in the same breath as presidents, CEOs, and kings?
This is a guy who always wanted more than he had. You could sense his ambition.
Politics seems like the obvious path. So naturally, once Larry hits 17, he enrolls at UCLA as a political science major. But then, something seemingly insignificant changes everything. On impulse, he enrolls in a few extra classes in real estate. Suddenly, he's not dreaming of the White House anymore, but about skyscrapers and fortunes. After 2 more years and armed with a real estate MBA, Larry Fink is still unsure on how exactly to turn his dreams into a reality. But his goal still remains the same: power and riches. So like most power-hungry finance graduates, he heads to the place where megalomania naturally takes you to the top: Wall Street. Little does he know the trauma waiting for him when he gets there. Now, 34 years old, Larry is at a crossroads. He's spent almost a decade climbing the ranks at First Boston, one of New York's most prestigious investment banks. But he's just made a huge mistake. One that'll do more than just tarnish his tidy plan for world domination. Let's rewind a little bit. It's 1976 and Larry Fink steps onto Wall Street for the very first time, joining the bond trading department at First Boston. As a young Jewish trader, he encounters the prejudices typical of that era. But Wall Street, for all its sins, has one sacred truth. It worships only money. Make money and suddenly nothing else matters. And Larry has found his calling. He starts printing money by the millions. How?
At First Boston, he was a pioneer in developing an obscure financial product that was pretty much under the public radar.
3 words: mortgage-backed securities. Words that still send shivers down the back of Wall Street today. But what even are mortgage-backed securities? Think of mortgage-backed securities like a financial casserole. Mix a hunch of home loans, bake them into one product, then slice it up to sell to investors. The idea? Diversification. The danger? Too many bad ingredients ruin the dish. Homeowners pay their mortgages and investors collect steady profits. A beautiful arrangement if you're on the right side. In other words, it's the perfect fixed income instrument to monetize the American dream itself. Along with mullets and shoulder pads, mortgage-backed securities are all the rage in the 1980s. And Larry didn't just ride this wave, he practically created it. He helped invent, popularize, and of course profit handsomely from these complex financial instruments. But more interestingly, he will profit even more from the collapse of his creation later. For now though, he rises faster than anyone before him at First Boston, and within 2 years he becomes managing director, the youngest ever in the firm's history. Larry even overheard whispers around the office. The higher-ups were considering him for CEO. But with such extraordinary success comes extraordinary ego. He starts rubbing people the wrong way. At his worst moments, he is remembered as a big swinging dick. Wall Street loves putting ballooning egos on pedestals, but it loves tearing them down even more. One misstep is all it takes. Determined to cement his path to CEO, Larry takes a huge gamble. The Federal Reserve is about to make a decision on interest rates soon, and Larry goes all in. Certain that interest rates will rise, he positions the firm to profit accordingly. And just in case he's wrong, he buys financial insurance, a hedge to protect the downside. Then disaster strikes. Interest rates don't rise, they plunge. Larry shrugs. He'd anticipated this possibility after all. His carefully placed insurance would cover the losses, or at least he believes it would. Except there was a problem, a single devastating numerical mistake. Larry had miscalculated his hedge using incorrect numbers.
I was so angry at myself. I was just mortified at myself.
A small error on paper, but in reality, it cost the firm $100 million, gone in an instant. A $100 million mistake, enough to destroy anyone's career overnight, no matter how brilliant. Despite generating at least $1 billion for the firm during his tenure, Larry quickly becomes an outcast at First Boston, one that people won't talk to in the hallways, and not long after, he's jobless. Taking on too much risk in the markets can completely screw you, but you don't have to make the same mistakes as Larry Fink here. If you've thought about investing and trading on the capital markets but are too scared of the risk, our free community group is the place to learn and take that first step. We have started a free group where we're working with an ex-Wall Street trader whom I know personally, so if you're ready to stop following the crowd And especially in these volatile times like now, you have a massive opportunity to capitalize on all that crazy stuff that's going on in the world. And if you're ready to do that and to learn how the elites and the big boys, the big institutions are moving and copy their exact moves, check out the link to our group in the description below. And by the way, this is the first version of this group. We will add much more value, free downloads, cool analyses and so on in the coming weeks. Just give us a little bit more time.
We should have been fired a year ago and a quarter ago before the loss. We were making so much money, and we had no idea why we were making so much money. We had just extraordinary risk.
Larry had always gotten ahead by taking more risk than others, but ultimately that's exactly what led to his downfall. For the first time, Larry carefully considers risk. Risk, he realizes, is a powerful drug, seductive, but dangerous. He had learned this lesson the hard way. From now, he vows to become the master of managing risk. What seems like a conservative approach would soon become Larry's golden ticket to world domination. But first, Larry has another hurdle to overcome. To rebuild, he needs an elite team of traders. A tough task when you're the castaway of Wall Street after losing $100 million. Yet, somehow, he pulls it off anyway. A powerhouse team of 8 all-stars. Now all he needs is financial backing. That's when Larry crosses paths with legendary financier Stephen Schwarzman, co-founder of the private equity titan Blackstone. Schwarzman, always looking for his next big play, agrees to bankroll Think's fledgling operation with $5 million for a 50% stake. And just like that, in 1988, BlackRock is born. Right from the start, BlackRock flips the script on Wall Street by putting risk management front and center.
The investors had no idea the risk they were taking, and there was a great need for a company that starts off with a high concentration in risk analytics.
BlackRock's sales pitch: manage fixed income assets like bonds for clients while offering state-of-the-art risk analysis as part of the deal, and in return they charge a percentage fee based on the assets under management. Unlike traditional firms, which separated risk oversight from their day-to-day investing, BlackRock's innovation is to embed rigorous risk modeling directly into every investment decision from day one. Larry's idea of managing risk catches on fast, despite the high-stress nature of the job. Within months, the company turns huge profits, and within a year, they were managing nearly $3 billion. Unheard of for a firm that young. But behind the rapid rise was something even more extraordinary, a secret weapon that would secure BlackRock's reign for decades.
His open secret to success is a massive computerized system called Aladdin.
Short for Asset, Liability, Debt and Derivative Investment Network. Aladdin was more than a computerized system. It becomes the brain and beating heart of Larry's new empire. It allows Larry's team to instantly simulate endless what-if scenarios. What if interest rates rise by 1%? How would that impact a $10 billion bond portfolio? What happens if mortgages in California start defaulting en masse? Aladdin delivers answers in a blink. For any large institution trying to navigate volatile markets, Aladdin becomes priceless. Its moment of truth comes in 1994 during the infamous Great Bond Market Massacre. As bond prices plummet across Wall Street, most investors suffer brutal losses. But BlackRock, having spent 5 years fine-tuning its risk models, weathers the storm with minimal damage. Clients quickly realized it wasn't luck, it was Aladdin. The software flags critical risks early, allowing BlackRock to sidestep the worst of the carnage. In fact, this episode reveals an early pattern and sends a clear message. When things get messy, when risk gets complicated, you better call BlackRock. And as you'll see later, that message still holds true today. However, BlackRock's unbothered rise was short-lived as Fink and Schwartzman soon begin to butt heads. Larry wants to attract the best talent by offering ownership in BlackRock, but he insists this comes entirely from Schwartzman's share. After all, he and his team are doing all the heavy lifting. Schwartzman, not one to be pushed around, refuses.
We set up an economic arrangement which ended up being inappropriate for a business that was growing as rapidly, needed to add as many people, and I made a mistake. I took the original agreement, I didn't want to change it, which was advantageous, for my side.
He clings to the contract, but called his decision a heroic mistake years later. By 1994, BlackRock manages over $50 billion. But the power struggle between Larry and Steven reaches its inevitable conclusion, a split. Schwartzman stays with Blackstone. Larry takes full control of BlackRock. But what happens next is what truly sets BlackRock apart, transforming it into something far more powerful and potentially dangerous than just any other financial giant. Something beyond even Larry Fink's wildest imagination. After BlackRock goes public in 1999, it enters an era of rapid growth and expansion. The secret weapon behind its explosive growth? Aladdin. What began as BlackRock's internal risk management software soon becomes the gold standard for portfolio management on Wall Street, sold to rival firms and clients eager to understand complex financial risks. Aladdin quickly becomes a virtual money printing machine, charging juicy fees for a software that the entire financial industry desperately needs, and not only them. BlackRock is no longer just an asset manager. Larry Fink is building a sprawling empire. But to realize his grand vision, Larry goes on a shopping spree in the early 2000s. With every deal, BlackRock expands beyond its roots in fixed income securities. Now it's equities, hedge funds, or global fund platforms. BlackRock becomes a one-stop shop for institutional investors, trusted to manage everything, everywhere. With each company they absorb, BlackRock grows tremendously, with their assets under management rising dramatically each passing year. But it's a time of complete market mayhem that provides Larry with his biggest prize yet and finally makes BlackRock a world power. Mortgage-backed securities. Remember those? Larry, the kingpin of these kinds of securities in the 80s, had since learned his lesson. For the last 20 years, he'd been busy nurturing his risk management empire, extending its reach, bolstering its influence. But MBSs hadn't conveniently disappeared. In fact, they'd cast a spell over American finance and promptly corrupted it.
There are fears the sell-off will continue on Wall Street.
It is definitely a very, very difficult time, and it's not going to get better quickly.
We are watching this market deteriorate. The stock market is now down 21%.
Larry, familiar with the sting of MBSs, had limited BlackRock's exposure to these volatile securities. Major banks feasted greedily on them without truly understanding the risks. Huge financial giants woke up to the realization that the billions they had invested in these assets were evaporating before their eyes. As they watched Bear Stearns lose 90% of its value and the Titan Lehman Brothers become the Titanic, everyone began to panic. This spelled disaster to many, but opportunity to a few. Companies run conservatively, like JP Morgan by Jamie Dimon, managed to scoop up sickly competitors at a bargain and becoming the world's most powerful bank. Larry didn't intend to miss the party. Barclays Bank bought part of the collapsed Lehman, thinking they were getting a steal, until they ran the numbers and figured out that they'd bought the financial equivalent of nuclear waste. Desperate for cash, Barclays was forced to sell its crown jewel, Barclays Global Investors, home to iShares, the world's leading provider of passive ETFs. Larry refuses to let the opportunity pass. Flush with cash and ambition, he seizes the moment and strikes a deal to buy the crown jewel out for $13.5 billion. While few talk about it, that single deal transformed them into the world's largest asset manager. ETFs are exchange-traded funds and let investors spread their money across countless companies and reduce risk. And now the biggest are all owned by BlackRock. They buy the individual stocks on behalf of their clients and wind up owning chunks of about any big company you can imagine. Now, 4% in Walmart or 8% in UPS sounds more harmless than it actually is. But it means that BlackRock isn't just a player anymore. They have become a kingmaker, holding major voting power over corporate decisions from executive pay to diversity initiatives or mass layoffs. Yet crucially, BlackRock is still technically classified as a passive investor, just managing other people's money, not its own. It's a seemingly small technicality, but one that would soon give them unprecedented protection. More on that later. For now, Larry Fink had done it again. He capitalized brilliantly on the crisis. After the acquisition of BGI, passive ETFs like iShares would grow phenomenally popular over the following years. Looking back, BlackRock executives must have been feeling pretty pleased with themselves. With a stranglehold over passive ETFs right before their boom as an investing vehicle. But if all that isn't enough, these mortgage-backed securities, the ones wreaking havoc on firms across the world, they are so mind-bendingly complex. Companies stuck with these investments struggle to make sense of them. Larry, one of the original architects, suddenly becomes a very popular man. Already a leader in risk management, everyone wants Larry's team to take a look at their investment portfolios and lend their wisdom. For a price, of course. And then, the mighty architects of money, the bank of all banks, come calling.
BlackRock's relationship with the Fed is a really useful thing for the public to know about. The central bank can do things to make our lives better, and it can do stuff to make some people really rich.
None other than the Federal Reserve itself, trying to patch the pieces of a crumbling economy and stop the bleeding, is desperate for help.
As an expert on mortgage-backed securities, he was called in to help and to clean up.
US central bankers like Timothy Geithner tap BlackRock to write the playbook for how to rescue a financial system on the brink. This is no overstatement.
There was a day in which Geithner called him 21 times in a day.
Larry's team drafts the game plan for restructuring portfolios, valuing toxic assets, and bailing out collapsing banks. Larry Fink had turned the greatest financial disaster of a generation into his greatest triumph. While American finance takes years to rebound, he emerges with friends in high places, more money than ever, and what he's always wanted: the influence of a president, a company like a world power, without a single campaign nor a single vote. True power. And while no one was taking notice, he has created a playing field where, no matter what, BlackRock always wins.
We had no regulation, no federal or state public official had any idea what was going on in those markets.
I was really upset about what went on Wall Street that brought about the financial crisis. Not only almost destroyed the financial system of the United States, almost destroyed the financial system of the world.
After the financial crisis, the US government is forced to act. Wall Street's biggest players had done too much damage to everyday Americans. It was time to clamp down on them. Time to send shivers down the back of powerful Wall Street executives. Rules were passed and regulations tightened, at least for some.
And I think fundamentally the question is, do we feel like the regulators have the ability to protect the public?
The Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform was at the center of it all. The cornerstone of financial regulation. It creates a label, too big to fail. This designation targets SIFIs, whose collapse could bring the whole economy crashing down. Immediately, the biggest banks feel the heat. Dozens are swiftly branded as systemically important, triggering stricter oversight, expensive capital reserves, and burdensome regulatory compliance. Everything profit-seeking shareholders hate to hear. But what about BlackRock? Surely the world's largest asset manager fits this description. Not quite. Here's the little talked about part.
To quote Bernie Sanders, he says that it's not that Congress regulates Wall Street, it's Wall Street regulates Congress.
While the rules got stricter for everyone else, BlackRock executives were busy working their ways into the back rooms of Washington. By the time regulators finally turned their attention toward asset managers, it set off alarm bells at 50 Hudson Yards, BlackRock Global Headquarters. The regulation has to be stopped, no matter what. But Larry Fink and his team are ready. They have already carefully prepared a game plan to carve out a loophole for BlackRock to slip right through the new rules. BlackRock launches an unprecedented lobbying blitz combined with a strategic PR campaign aimed at convincing the public and regulators that a BlackRock collapse would pose no systemic risk. Larry Fink personally meets President Obama, ensuring his message is heard at the highest possible level. His efforts pay off big time. To this day, BlackRock has avoided the too big to fail label.
There needs to be greater scrutiny on the size and influence of large institutions if, number one, they can influence public policy and politics in ways that don't align with the public interest, right? And I think a lot of people on Wall Street will just brush that off and say, oh, that doesn't matter. And I would say they're dead wrong on that, because the majority of the US population has now believed for decades that the system is rigged.
However, there's an even more striking case of BlackRock's power in Washington: the passive investor status. If you are labeled a passive investor, you're off the hook from the rules everyone else has to follow. Now guess who decides if BlackRock is a passive investor or not? BlackRock itself. And it's this passive status that allows it to control substantial shares of companies across almost every industry without breaking a sweat.
The fact that BlackRock has extraordinary influence behind the scenes, it's unprecedented, and is able to use political spending and other influence tools to, be able to solidify that influence is not good for the public interest.
But BlackRock's power isn't just about dodging regulation, it's about writing the rules of the game.
So we have a relatively new infrastructure bank here, public infrastructure bank, called the Canada Infrastructure Bank, the CIB. The construction of that institution was both advised by these large private sector consultancy firms like McKinsey, but also importantly by BlackRock. And the result is that the public law governing the Canada Infrastructure Bank, called the Canada Infrastructure Bank Act, has as its mandate to use public money to generate private investment in ways that generate a return.
In other words, BlackRock doesn't just navigate systems, it shapes them from the ground up in ways that favor its mission. Critics see in Larry Fink and BlackRock the poster child for what's broken in the system. And you might wonder, how is this even possible? The answer is a playbook used by the corporate elites for centuries. They call it the revolving door between corporate America and the government.
I think what you've seen a lot of is in recent years this revolving door going back and forth, where, and it's happened at all the firms that I've seen, where people go in and out of government.
It's a common thing that banks, investment firms, and corporations hire government officials and governments hire corporate America's top executives, each borrowing influence from the other.
One of the problems you have is that some of the smartest people will go into politics, and they don't get paid a lot of money because it's not Singapore where the government officials get paid, somewhat competitive with the private sector. It's the US. And so when they leave office, they're going to want to go and get a job that is, that pays well, right? Because all of their friends that they went to business school or law school or undergrad with are getting paid a lot of money in sectors that have no value for society. Some of them, explicitly allowing money laundering or whatever. So they sort of want to get paid well.
But BlackRock turns this revolving door into an art form. By 2020, according to members of Congress, more than 100 individuals have moved back and forth between BlackRock and top US government institutions, the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, the SEC, and more. But it goes much further than that.
There is the potential for abuse too. People with experience could conceivably move into government, create regulations or create precedents that would favor their prior employers, and then turn around and go back to their prior employers. That's possible.
Many point to the fact that having BlackRock alumni in key regulatory positions makes it far less likely that the firm will face serious oversight.
I think we've just come to a place where, there's a revolving door, there's significant skewed incentives, and they've seized both U.S. parties. And I think the unfortunate reality is that it's very hard to see a way out and some way to restore the trust of the American people whose side I would take in this against their political system and two parties that seem to clearly not work for them.
And it's not just in the United States. BlackRock's political influence is global. Since 2004, the firm has hired at least 84 former government officials, regulators, and central bankers from around the world. At the same time, ex-BlackRock executives are placed into public office, quietly shaping policy from both sides of the fence. The most striking example, former BlackRock executive Friedrich Merz is now Chancellor of Germany, Europe's largest economy. But BlackRock isn't just influencing governments or global institutions, it's dictating terms.
And I've been in rooms with the World Bank and with multi-billion, trillion-dollar institutional investors where they've said to senior World Bank officials that what we want you, the World Bank, to do and other public banks to do is to wrap our investments in guarantees. We want you to guarantee both our capital and our returns.
BlackRock takes the profits and the public, the taxpayer, takes the risk. And they have the political muscle to get what they want. But if you think their power only comes with cozy government ties, you're missing the bigger picture. Because BlackRock's true power isn't who they know. The true reason why BlackRock is so scarily powerful is something else entirely. They say the world of finance runs on Excel, but these days it actually runs on Aladdin, the software platform designed by BlackRock. What Windows is to personal computing, Aladdin is to global finance. Only, unlike Windows, Aladdin has no serious competitor. Even BlackRock's fiercest rivals, Vanguard and State Street, rely on Aladdin as their go-to system to manage risk. In fact, it's the operating system of global finance. By 2020, Aladdin tracks an astounding 21 trillion for roughly 240 clients, about 10% of all global financial assets. Yet the real power of Aladdin lies not just with private finance, but with public institutions themselves. When crisis strikes, whether it's the US Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, or Japan's trillion-dollar pension funds, they all turn to a single company for help: BlackRock. During the COVID-19 market turmoil in 2020, the Federal Reserve urgently hires BlackRock to manage its massive bond buying programs designed to stabilize the economy.
BlackRock's relationship with the Fed is a really useful thing for the public to know about. The central bank can do things to make our lives better, and it can do stuff to make some people really rich. The Federal Reserve has gone to BlackRock for particular services that BlackRock is good at. Now, those programs were unprecedented and unusual.
In other words, central banks and governments across the globe have effectively outsourced their crisis response mechanisms directly to BlackRock's Aladdin.
What's unusual here is that the topmost people at the Federal Reserve are talking with the leader of the biggest asset management firm, and that in these moments of crisis, we're just going to this firm, not necessarily all other firms.
This dependency raises deeply uncomfortable questions. If every major financial institution depends on Aladdin, who steps in if Aladdin fails? And who ensures BlackRock doesn't exploit Aladdin's insights for its own gain? The simple answer: no one really. Aladdin itself isn't regulated. It's just a software tool owned by BlackRock. And remember, as an asset manager, BlackRock officially isn't considered systemically important. For now, BlackRock's Aladdin remains virtually unchecked, a single black box powering the operating system of global finance. And at the top of this mountain of money and influence stands one man, Larry Fink.
You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors.
But no empire lasts forever. Resistance is forming. Cracks are beginning to appear in Larry's fortress, because as powerful as he is, Larry Fink doesn't always get what he wants. Larry Fink is under fire. For years, BlackRock flew under the radar. In fact, outside of high finance, only few people knew about BlackRock. But that changed in the late 2010s. For the first time, the world pushes back. The allegation? BlackRock is destroying the planet, pumping billions into oil giants, leading to the demise of Amazon forest. Protesters repeatedly swarm BlackRock offices, even show up at Fink's own doorstep. The Guardian names Fink one of the top climate villains for this very reason. But Fink had seen this coming, and he came prepared. He didn't want to play the villain for long. Instead, he becomes the self-elected conscience of Wall Street. He rebrands BlackRock as a champion of ESG.
So it stands for environmental, social, and governance. And the idea is that there are specific issues, whether it has to do with climate change or whether it has to do with boardroom diversity, that are important issues for investors.
Larry Fink declares sustainability, diversity, and climate action as BlackRock's core investing principles.
This is a bunch of American Wall Street bullshit.
But at first, it works. Finally, a Wall Street titan that cares about people and the planet.
CEO Larry Fink made a lot of noise around it. The whole space had grown sort of in the last century, and the idea was that you invest in a portfolio, but you don't partake in the ones that you think are not ethically correct, because you know you don't want to make money off it effectively.
BlackRock is briefly celebrated as a trailblazer and hailed as a model for moral capitalism. But with its repositioning comes his boldest move yet. A direct threat to America's CEOs. Companies must go green or risk losing BlackRock's backing altogether.
You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors.
Suddenly, BlackRock is no longer just managing portfolios. They are shaping the moral compass of corporate America itself. But not everyone buys into it. Environmental groups point to the hypocrisy. BlackRock still had massive fossil fuel assets. On the other hand, Larry Fink's rebranding comes under huge scrutiny from powerful figures on Wall Street and in conservative circles.
And so what happened was they were saying ESG is good for profits, which is the sports equivalent of saying if I play really clean and I'm sportsmanlike, I'm going to win more games and score more goals. That was not true, as I saw from the inside.
Legendary investor Sam Zell mocks Larry Fink openly as extraordinarily hypocritical. You might already know the real estate tycoon from our previous documentary about him. Zell sarcastically remarks, "I didn't know Larry Fink had been made God." Venture capitalist Chamath Palihapitiya goes even further and labels ESG investing a complete fraud. For him, the politically correct rhetoric is only a way to mask poor financial returns. And even our interview guest publicly denounced BlackRock's ESG agenda as a mere marketing spin.
It was just a way to exploit people who care about it and waste time.
Here's how he breaks down how it worked from the inside.
You suddenly say, hey, I have this product And it's an ETF, or it's some sort of passive market product that's just effectively a basket of shares that tracks this index.
But remember, BlackRock's profits don't come from market performance. They come from the quiet fee they charge on your money, management fees on the trillions sitting in ETFs, typically just 0.5%. But across the industry, there's a constant hunt for reasons to raise those fees and extract more from the system, bit by bit.
And there's a lot of fee pressure, and I need to differentiate it so I can get premium pricing. And then you realize that, wait a second, if I take this ETF and make it an ESG ETF, or green ETF, which is, I would say, if I'd simplify it, it's the product equivalent of taking the thing you had, painting it green, and then putting it out there and putting a higher price tag. You know, is that something we can get away with? The market was doing this because there was an opportunity to go in and paint your thing green and get more fees, and no one is actually policing what it is to be green.
By 2022, the backlash had gone nuclear. Republicans painted BlackRock as the face of woke capitalism, accusing Fink of pushing ideology over investor interests. Florida pulled $2 billion from BlackRock funds in protest, the largest anti-ESG divestment in history. Texas launched investigations into whether BlackRock's politics were hurting retirees. By now, the writing was on the wall. Faced with mounting pressure from both sides of the fence, Larry Fink executes a quiet but profound retreat. BlackRock began rolling back its boldest ESG initiatives with minimal publicity. In late 2023, BlackRock quietly exited the Net Zero Asset Managers initiative. Internally, the firm is slowly shifting its language. In BlackRock's public documents, explicit references to ESG and diversity initiatives are removed. The firm is quietly stepping back from the controversy without drawing attention.
Larry Fink doesn't even say ESG anymore, right? I mean, that tells you that, you know, that's not even me saying I told you so. It's really just saying, look, you could see what it's all about. It's PR.
But their actions speak even louder than words. In 2020, BlackRock supported almost half of ESG shareholder proposals. By 2024, its support had plunged to a mere 4%. Many critical climate proposals failed to pass due to BlackRock's withdrawn support. Larry Fink himself admitted publicly that he's ashamed of being part of the ESG conversation. He attempts to distance himself from a movement that has become too politically charged.
I think it's terribly dangerous when you have business leaders go up and they claim that they have values and that they care about things and they want to do the right thing. If they're found out later to be full of hot air, we're not just going to waste time. It's even worse, they're gonna destroy the public's faith in business.
However, Larry Fink is always looking ahead. The tide has shifted. The ESG hype train was over and the profit potential has clearly waned. But when profits dry up, BlackRock doesn't stand around and wait. Quietly but decisively, they've moved on. ESG has become a distraction, and with passive ETFs reaching a saturation point, Larry Fink knew it was time for BlackRock's next strategic move. Something tangible, essential, and far more profitable than moral branding or abstract indexes. Something that affects every part of modern civilization, everywhere on the planet.
They appear to show Russian forces executing a group of Ukrainian soldiers who had just surrendered. See those bodies there? It comes as a ceasefire, appears to be even further away after Trump's 2-hour call with Vladimir Putin.
Amidst all this chaos, one name keeps popping up: BlackRock. Why is BlackRock, a Wall Street giant, so deeply involved in what's happening in Ukraine? Why do Larry Fink's fingerprints seem to be everywhere?
Well, who's interested in Ukraine? Now you have Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, who is currently discussed as the likely individual whose organization, BlackRock, will rebuild Ukraine whenever the war ends. Gosh, that's interesting. Have you ever heard of anything like that in the history of the United States, where we went to war somewhere and we knew that when it ended, we knew exactly who the corporate head was who was going to lead the rebuilding effort? And we had set aside $1 trillion for the purpose. mean, stop and think about that.
Only months into the war, Larry Fink had already personally struck a deal with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, placing BlackRock at the heart of Ukraine's post-war reconstruction. $1 billion already secured from global donors like the World Bank, all funneled into a new BlackRock-backed Ukraine Development Fund dedicated to rebuild the shattered nation once peace arrives. But why is a profit-driven Wall Street giant suddenly so eager to rebuild a war-torn country? Is BlackRock genuinely a Samaritan, extending a helping hand? Or is there something darker beneath the surface? A strategy that exploits desperation to feed a much larger ambition? Truth is, this isn't really about Ukraine. This is part of BlackRock's grand master plan, a $68 trillion play to dominate the future of infrastructure.
When asset managers just invested in financial assets, what they did was actually pretty far removed from our daily lives, the daily lives of most individuals. But once asset managers are owning and controlling the houses in which we live, the roads on which we drive to work or pay tolls, the hospitals in which we're being treated, the schools in which our children are going to school and so on, then they potentially have a far more significant and far more direct impact on the daily lives of large numbers of people than they did back in the day.
In simpler terms, when BlackRock only dominated the ETF market, their influence had clear limits. But now, with their eyes set on infrastructure, the stakes have never been higher, and their impact never greater. And Larry Fink is just getting started.
We believe infrastructure is only at the beginning of a real major asset class. There are some structural demands that are going to increase the issuance of more and more infrastructure.
Structural demands. This is just corporate speak. What Fink really means is this. By 2040, the world needs $68 trillion in infrastructure investment, $2 trillion in ports alone, and BlackRock is setting itself up to secure as much as possible of this gigantic pie.
They want investments that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars at once, and that are long-term and structural. So clearly infrastructure fits within that.
Across the globe, infrastructure, roads, hospitals, water systems has traditionally been controlled by public institutions, but increasingly it's being handed over to for-profit giants like BlackRock, and for them it's the ultimate prize.
It's not like you have a lot of competition for the one international airport at your major city in a region, right? You buy that and you have control of it, and it's a monopoly. Similarly with water infrastructure, once you buy it, it's yours, right? And there's no way somebody's not going to open up a new, water and sanitation system.
And the beauty for the owners is this: no matter how dramatically prices rise overnight for water, heating, electricity, or transportation, people have no alternative. Infrastructure delivers stable, long-term returns because people can't opt out. No one chooses where their water comes from or which canal ships their goods. You can't choose a different tap for your water or switch airports for your next flight. And nobody is building a second Panama Canal anytime soon. Whoever owns it has effectively secured a regional monopoly and gets to reap all the profits without having to worry about annoying competitors. A textbook example of what makes infrastructure investing so attractive. It's an invisible lifeline for everyday Americans. Any disruption to it, and prices for electronics, food, and fuel could skyrocket in no time. It's the world's most critical trade route, and now it's back under American control: the Panama Canal. In March 2025, a $23 billion deal is announced to place Panama Canal ports back under American control. And the Panama Canal deal is more than just symbolic. It's a massive milestone in BlackRock's quest to dominate global infrastructure. Because the deal is spearheaded not by Washington, it's led by Larry Fink, a man with close, long-standing ties to President Trump. If the deal goes through, Panama Canal's critical ports, Balboa and Cristobal, key global trade choke points, will soon sit firmly under BlackRock's control. But this isn't just about ships and ports. This is about who gets to own the bloodlines of modern civilization and the consequences of letting a private corporation this big take control. Let's say a municipality sells its water infrastructure to a firm like BlackRock. In return, it gets an upfront payment and a long-term service contract, often 20 or 30 years. And the new owners promise to take good care of the system. But here's the twist. Will the new owner really care if your water pipes corrode? Will they keep their promise to maintain the system, or just happily collect dividends?
Obviously, regulators need to make sure that that the deals that they cut, where the private sector is involved, are fair to the public, right? That the public and the taxpayer isn't getting ripped off.
And what the asset managers learn too is that they get these really long-term contracts. They make all kinds of promises. And whether or not they deliver on them or not is partly irrelevant.
And there's no real incentive to do it.
What purpose, what reason could you have for enhancing or improving infrastructure when you're nearing, the last 5 or 10 years of a 30-year contract? They just have little to no interest in actually maintaining essential infrastructure in the interest of that community. They have an interest only in that infrastructure to the extent that it matches their profitability expectations.
This isn't just theoretical, it's a global pattern.
I mean, from looking around at the implications of 30 or 40 years of this tendency of selling off essential infrastructure and then it crumbling, and then the public sector having to either renationalize it or provide a bailout or preferential loans or allow the private provider to dramatically increase user fees. All of those are coming to play around the world.
The United Kingdom provides a well-known example where the public paid the price. Water privatization there has been a catastrophe. Not only is the water more expensive than in neighboring countries, it's more polluted because maintenance investments didn't happen. Profits always came first. But now that we've seen how infrastructure works, let's look at how BlackRock is executing its $68 trillion game plan.
From agriculture to AI, BlackRock owns everything and still keeps...
While it's the most popular claim about BlackRock, it's not entirely true. Yet. But in January 2024, they came one step closer to making it a reality.
US investment giant BlackRock has agreed to buy Global Infrastructure Partners, or GIP, for about $12.5 billion. Now, the deal is the firm's largest acquisition since its 2009 purchase of Barclays Global Investors, putting the asset manager on a path to becoming the biggest provider of exchange-traded funds.
While the deal made some waves, only Larry Fink and a few select people could know that this deal was part of a much bigger game plan. The deal instantly catapulted BlackRock into one of the planet's largest infrastructure owners, directly controlling about $150 billion worth of critical global assets.
Any big deal, there's got to be an imperative behind it. From BlackRock's point of view, why do you need this deal?
Well, we know the corporate answer already. There are some structural demands for infrastructure. But this is the moment where you have to pause and think for a while. The more you think about it, the darker it gets. Structural demands. Ongoing wars and global conflicts are leaving infrastructure around the world in ruins, creating enormous and enormously profitable rebuilding opportunity. As a former World Bank official who declined to be named puts it,
it will be big enough to take on the big restructuring projects that will emerge from the Ukraine and Gaza conflicts.
Regions torn apart by violence will urgently require airports, roads, bridges, and power grids rebuilt once guns go silent and peace returns. BlackRock's infrastructure bet is also precisely targeted toward those inevitable post-war investment opportunities. Right after the bombs fell in Ukraine, Larry Fink moved fast. Now, BlackRock is the gatekeeper of the entire post-war recovery. One of the biggest reconstruction efforts since World War II, and they are holding the keys. But Ukraine is just the beginning. It can be seen as a test case, laying the groundwork to prepare the firm for future large-scale reconstruction opportunities worldwide. With every new global conflict looming, reconstruction needs and thus profit opportunities are booming. Each area devastated by war creates another set of airports, bridges, railways and digital networks to rebuild. Each is another catalyst for the $68 trillion infrastructure gold rush the firm is targeting. Larry Fink wants to make investing in infrastructure the next big thing, just as he did it with ETFs. But if that wasn't enough, the whole thing is getting even sweeter for him. Public money is helping BlackRock. This is what finance professionals call the catalytic capital strategy. It's the dream for any investor.
If we continue to give them public money to ensure that they have no risk and generate high returns, of course they're going to love it. Why wouldn't they? I mean, it's the perfect scenario where they go and tell the government, we want to, invest in whatever that disaster or problem is, or reconstruction. You just guarantee our returns. Wonderful. It's the ideal scenario.
BlackRock's goal is clear: encourage private capital to flow into war-torn regions, despite ongoing instability and risk. It seems like a win-win situation. While a destroyed country like Ukraine can expect a healthy influx of money once the war ends, BlackRock has enabled investors to profit from post-war rebuilding with limited risk. And some praise BlackRock for attracting much-needed investment into war-riddled countries in desperate need of capital, but others point to uncomfortable realities.
Do you think there's a motive of others to have war because now they can raise money and come in and build infrastructure and make more money? Do you think there's profit as a motive to have this war and continue the war?
BlackRock profits indirectly but significantly from ongoing global conflicts through massive holdings in defense companies already. Through its index funds and ETFs, BlackRock holds massive stakes in some of the world's largest arms manufacturers, talking billions in Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, or Raytheon, just to name a few. These firms directly profit from increased global tensions as wars drive demand for fighter jets, missiles and bombs. Critics have accused BlackRock bluntly of making a killing on killing, profiting twice. First, through the weapons that feed wars, then again through lucrative reconstruction investments. BlackRock, of course, rejects the charge. They insist we don't pick winners, we just track the market. If defense firms show up in market tracking indexes, they're just along for the ride. And with only 5 to 7% stakes, they claim they've got no real say in how those companies operate. Yet, as BlackRock's prior aggressive stance on ESG proves, if BlackRock wants to take influence, they can most certainly take influence. And BlackRock's new role in infrastructure will enable them to potentially take more influence than ever before. The question remains how BlackRock will use this power.
You cannot deliver profit maximizing infrastructure and expect that to also respond to social equity concerns and universal access. They want this win-win situation where government, society, and corporations will all win, right? But that's not what's happening. The only winners are those who are, taking home the profits.
While BlackRock's intentions remain debated, one larger truth stands clear. Larry Fink is building something unprecedented, a kind of everything store for investors. BlackRock now offers opportunities in every conceivable sector, from controversial defense and surveillance technology employed by authoritarian regimes to renewable energy pioneers or post-war reconstruction projects. Whether countries move toward peace or sink deeper into conflict, BlackRock's vast financial network is structured to profit either way. While some demand more regulation or greater accountability for the world's largest asset manager, at the end of the day, BlackRock is doing what they always did. They only respond to one thing and one thing only: the flow of money.
I don't think that they arranged the war, but they definitely use its results, that's for sure.
If you like this video, you will probably like this video about the first man in US history that was more powerful than the president.